Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. As 2015 gets underway, how should we assess the first 17 months of the Modi government? Sorry, that should read the first 7 months of the Modi government. How effectively is it responding to the economic challenges the country faces? And is it in danger of being deflected by irrelevant, subversive issues like Lagh Jihad and religious conversions? That's the key issue I shall discuss in part 2 with the man they consider the economic inspiration of the government, Columbia Professor of Economics and Law, Jagdish Bhagwati. But first, yesterday's interview with the Defence Minister has created ripples. His comments about one rank, one pension have irritated and even upset many ex-servicemen because they believe he's setting the ground for a revision of the concept that will ensure he does not properly fulfill it. Secondly, the Minister's comments about the alleged terror incident on the high seas have mystified many analysts. What does he mean when he says the boat's alleged contact with the Pakistani army is irrelevant? How confident is he that the crew committed suicide by taking cyanide? And how convincing is his argument that the boat was involved in terrorist activity and not smuggling? Those are the issues I shall tackle in part 1.
There is still dispute on the method of calculating the ORP.
Number 1.
But the basic framework of concept of ORP will be fulfilled. In spite of warning, instead of surrendering, the act of committing suicide, by what means we are not aware.
And now joining me to discuss Defence Minister Parrikar's interview is the chairman of the ex-servicemen's movement, Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan, and the strategic affairs editor of the Business Standard, Colonel Ajai Shukla. Colonel Shukla, let me start with you, and let me in fact start with the answers the minister gave, specifically with regard to the terror incident or the alleged terror incident. Now, the minister says he's pretty confident that the people on board that boat were in touch with the Pakistan army and the Pakistan authorities, but he's unable to provide any specific proof to substantiate that claim. And subsequently, he even said, not once but twice, that it was irrelevant whether they were in touch with the Pakistan army or not. What do you make of all of that?
Karan, I have to say, diplomats often have to lie for their country. Sometimes defense ministers have to grit their teeth and do it too. But when they do have to come out there and justify something, even a botched operation as this apparently was, they need to prepare well. They need to make sure that this was done properly. Now, in what Mr. Parrikar told you yesterday, and I've been through it twice, there are at least 5 major lacunas that I can list out. First of all, he said that going back on the promises that were made earlier, he said the intercepts cannot be made in public because sources would be compromised. So therefore, that whole build-up to the thing about how the NTRO intercepted conversations and so on, which was going to be offered as proof of this being a terrorist boat, is now no longer going to be made public. Why this would compromise sources, nobody knows, because what has already been made public is that the NTRO is monitoring intercepts of fishing vessels. The only thing that is being hidden now is what was actually said, and that is already known to the people who spoke.
Okay.
What is being hidden, the people who it's being hidden from are the Indian public. So I don't know which security sources are being compromised by this. Secondly, he kept saying that the fishing boat was lurking inside our territorial waters. Our territorial waters are just 12 nautical miles. This fishing boat was lurking in our exclusive economic zone, which is international waters. So you need really good reason to pull in a boat that is lurking in your international waters, even if it's in your exclusive economic zone. Thirdly, he kept saying, forget about the intercepts. The fact that the boat lurked in the same position for 12 to 14 hours is proof that it was not a routine fishing mission. In fact, Karan, it is fishing boats that lurk at the same space in the same place for a long period of time, while the fishermen lay out their nets and do that. It is terrorist boats that come in quickly, scuttle in, fulfill their mission and scuttle out.
Okay.
So this doesn't gel either. Fourthly, he says that the Coast Guard vessel, the CGS Rajarathan, was 1 kilometer away from the fishing boat because it feared a USS Cole-style attack where it might be laden with explosives and it might come and blow up the Coast Guard vessel. If it was 1 kilometer away, how did the Coast Guard people in the middle of the night find out that these people were dressed not like normal fishermen and that they were, scuttling around, and then they went down below and set their boat on fire? And lastly, and he's come up with this cyanide theory without a shred of evidence. I mean, it's laughable. How do you know that they went and consumed cyanide? I mean, as a defense minister rationalizing an operation, you really have to be more responsible than that.
In which case, let me ask you two quick follow-up questions to that very comprehensive first answer you've just given me. Are you saying to me that the reasons the minister gave for believing that this was a terrorist-connected event and not a smuggling-connected event are reasons that simply do not wash with you? Because the minister set out 5 reasons, you've been through all of them, you're saying they simply don't wash.
They simply don't wash. The minister is in the unenviable position of having to justify a botched operation. Now, this happens frequently. When you have a neighbor like Pakistan where there's cross-border terrorism going on, one has to frequently operate in less than ideal conditions. And this was clearly one of those conditions. But when something goes wrong or when we overplay our hand or something, firstly, it has to be justified more elegantly, more comprehensively, and more credibly.
Okay.
This was a really slipshod job by the defense minister. And finally, I think behind the scenes, one cannot just say that, okay, a Pakistani boat was knocked off, so it's perfectly fine. The Indian public won't have any problems with that. Behind the scenes, we still have to make sure that this is investigated properly, that if there were shortcomings in this operation, if it was not done in an ideal manner, there should be somebody who is taken to task for this.
Now, one other thing the minister was quite emphatic about, and he said it with enormous emphasis, is that the boat was not hit by any shots fired by the Rajarathan. Are you convinced of that? Because I remember one of the articles you had in the early days after the incident quoted a 3-star retired but unnamed Navy admiral saying that in fact the most likely theory was that the boat actually was hit by a warning shot fired by the Rajarathan. So are you convinced by the minister or are you not convinced?
Look, what really strikes me is that the minister is now saying that the CGS Rajarathan, which was the Coast Guard ship, did not come closer than 1 kilometer to the boat. Now, if that was the case, then the whole question of firing warning shots ahead of the boat comes into question. You can't fire warning shots from 1 kilometer away. You have to come in some proximity. The range of a light machine gun is 300 meters, 500 meters at the very outset with a great loss of accuracy. When you're firing at that range, you're in any case not accurate, especially when you're swaying in a boat on the sea. Okay. So I simply don't buy this argument that we're absolutely sure that the Coast Guard boat did not hit the fishing vessel. Now they're saying they're going to place video evidence before the public, and I would welcome that, and I would welcome any proof that this boat was not hit. But earlier they had said that they were going to place intercepts before the public, and now they're backsliding from that. So I'm not optimistic that you'll see any video evidence either.
One quick question, Colonel Shukla, to sum up in a sense your assessment and response to the minister. In an earlier episode of this particular program, you said to me that you believe that both the NTRO and the Coast Guard, one had misunderstood and misinterpreted the intelligence, the other had as a result overreacted, and you said the minister perhaps was now trying to do the honorable thing, cover up for the two. Do you still stand by that feeling after hearing the minister speak on this subject for 25 minutes yesterday?
I'm more convinced than ever. The minister is in the unenviable position of having to cover up for a botched operation. And what I really hold against him is that he's not prepared well for doing so. His arguments don't gel. Parts of his argument contradict other parts of the argument. I think he really should have got together a more plausible story and presented it better.
All right, stay with us for a moment, Colonel Shukla. I'm going to turn now to General Kadyan, the chairman of the ex-servicemen's movement, and talk to you, General Kadyan, about the comments the minister made about one rank, one pension. The minister says that one rank, one pension will be effective from July at the latest, but he's actually personally hopeful that he can make it effective from the 31st of March. How do you first respond to that date that he said? 31st March, possibly July for certain.
Karan, before I come to this question, my overall impression of the minister's interview that you took was that here is a man who spoke from the heart, he is sincere and is committed to looking after the defense services. Now, when you say effective date stays 1st April 2014, which he committed. It is the date of implementation. He said farthest is July, he will try to make it earlier, where we are slightly unhappy about it because we've been in a hurry. But then we also realize that is a complicated issue. It has waited 30 years, a few more months, 2 or 3 or 4 is not actually material. I wish it had been done earlier, but if there are some complications, the delay is not crucial.
Now, the second thing the minister said is that cost is not a concern or a deterrent. I asked him that 2 or 3 times and he gave that answer equally emphatically on each of those occasions. He said the best official estimate he had of cost was between 8 and 9,000 crores, but he added that there were various estimates ranging from 14,000 at one end down to just 100 or 200 crore at the other. He said he personally believed the cost would be somewhere in the region of 6,000 crore. Now, does all of that cost is not a deterrent and it's a factor that he's taken on board, does that sound reassuring to you?
I find it very reassuring when the defense minister of the country says that in implementing O ROP, cost is not a consideration, whether it is 8 to 9 or 9 to 10 or whatever. He made it very clear. 1 or 2 points if I am allowed to make. First is he mentioned about the apprehension that the demand may also be raised, similar one, by the civil employees. Now, this is a typical trap which the bureaucracy always throws at the politicians and scares them that the money will really explode.
Has this worried you, this particular point?
No, it hasn't worried me. But the very fact that the defense minister mentions, I want to caution him that this is a normal bait that they lay, because out of all the millions of central government employees, everyone except the defense forces goes up to the 60 years of age, no matter how high he is able to rise.
So what you're really saying is you're sending a message to the defense minister through this interaction that please do not pay attention to this fear that the bureaucrats are putting in your ears, that if you concede O ROP to the soldiers, you'll have to concede something similar to civil servants. Don't pay attention to that fear, you're saying to him.
Absolutely. If the demand was so crucial for them, they would have hesitated long ago.
All right. Let me come to a specific point the minister made about O ROP, and it's one that I can see from the interaction on the social media has worried many ex-servicemen. It's given ex-servicemen the feeling that the minister is trying to find a backdoor way of sliding out of full O ROP, even while saying he's committed to full O ROP. So let me explain that point. The minister says full O ROP will be given, but then he adds there are some anomalies that he needs to find a solution to. And the anomaly in particular that worried him, and he spoke about it at some length, is that it's often the case that 2 officers of the same rank, say for example colonels, retire in the same year, having spent the same number of years in service, but one of those colonels has been a colonel for a longer period than the other one. And the minister says that that colonel who's been a colonel for a longer period will have a higher salary when he retires. And as pension is salary related, the person who has a higher salary will have to get a slightly bigger pension than the person who has a lower salary. And thus there will be a difference between the 2 people, even though they're of the same rank and they've had the same length of service. But the difference, he says, probably won't be more than 500 rupees or 1,000 rupees. Now, is that a level of difference you can accept, or do you think even that difference will vitiate the promise of full O ROP?
Karan, O ROP is black and white. It is either there or it is not there. We are asking for equation, equality. Equality can only be defined in one way, 100%. I think the minister has not been fully briefed. He is not fully in the grasp of the intricacies. There are various parameters. We focused on 2 parameters. One, the length of total service, and other is the rank. The parameters should be, firstly, it is not officer-centric. Every time we talk of colonel, The officers form only 4% of the population of the pensioners. Neither their number nor the money involved for officers is significant. We should focus, it should remain focused on the JCOs and Jawans, who are 96% of the total population. So I will take the example of a Havaldar, for example. There is so much of variation. You know, the army manpower structure is very complicated, very complex. Only a man in uniform actually comprehend it. We have 16 ranks from a sepoy to a general. We have different arms and services. We have different categories, different trades, different groups impacting on your pay and on your pension. Now, coming back to the length of service in the rank, in my own regiment, infantry regiment, we have 23 battalions. Each battalion has a different timeline when a man is promoted Nayak or Havaldar, not because of his efficiency, but because it is vacancy based. It is the management issue.
So what you're saying what you're saying is very important, which is why I'm interrupting. You're saying if the minister is to be guided in determining OROP by the length of service in the rank, then different traditions in different battalions determined by vacancy and not by efficiency will lead to enormous complications, and it will be unfair that one man, because of a vacancy, held the rank, say, of Havaldar for 2 years more than another man who, because of a vacancy not being present, held it for 2 years less, and therefore their pensions differ. And therefore you're saying there's a very good case for equalization of pension, and everyone of the same rank and the same service, regardless of how long they held that last rank for, should get the same pension.
That exactly is the essence of OROP.
Have you made this representation to anyone in the ministry? Because clearly someone has, in a sense, informed the minister of these details and led him to believe that in fact you need a level of differentiation in terms of length of service in a rank. So have you made representations to the government to say, look, you're going down the wrong path?
The problem with the ministry is that they do not have a single uniformed person in their advisory circle. I have been repeatedly telling them that you engage a colonel level officer as a OSD in the ministry who can advise you on these issues. Now there is joint working group where the defense services and the CGTA people work. They did not meet from April last time. I met the Minister of State for Defense. I spoke to him, met him also last month. He did say that he will reinvigorate the joint working group.
And when you met the Minister of State for Defense last month, was this the specific issue that came up?
No, that came up later when he called me up. And I explained that to him.
So you have explained this to the RRM?
I have that this variation is nothing to do with the individual. It's a compulsion of the system.
But you're doing something more important today. Today, you are sending out a message to the government and to anyone else who's watching that full OROP is what you want. Full OROP means the same pension for everyone who's had the same length of service and has retired at the same rank, regardless of when they retire. And you're saying it is not acceptable that there should be even small differences of 500 or 1,000 rupees just because one officer held the last rank for a year or more longer than another officer. That level of differentiation is not acceptable, and that's the message you're sending out today.
The difference, even if it is 1 rupee, will eat into the definition of OROP. Then it is not an equation, it is not OROP, it is a pension enhancement, which is a different matter altogether.
And that will therefore leave the ex-serviceman very unhappy.
It will. I want to suggest how it can be worked out.
Very quickly, because they're running out of time. Really, very quickly.
You take 1st April 2014 as the baseline, which has been accepted. You go back, let's say 1 year. Take Havaldars. You say, all right, 3,000 Havaldars have retired in that 1 year. You take the maximum that was earned by any Havaldar and make that as the calculation.
In other words, you're saying equalize at the highest, not at the lowest.
If you do at the lowest, then you are reducing some pension, there will be litigation. The difference is not material.
So you give a benefit to those who are lower without prejudicing those who are higher.
The system should avoid litigation and hesitation. This is the only way you can avoid.
So what you're basically saying is equalize pensions for all ranks, both JCOs as well as officers at the highest level of pension, equivalent to that rank at the time of retirement in that year.
And keep it in future equal.
All right, that's clear-cut advice, and let's hope the government is listening. I'm going to go back to Colonel Shukla. Colonel Shukla, the minister spoke on a range of issues. I have only time for you to answer one question, but Talking about the other issues, because we've already talked about O ROP and we've talked about the alleged terror boat. Are you convinced that he's taking the right approach in terms of defense agents, which he hopes to regularize, although with very severe, strict limitations and conditions? Do you think he's taking the right approach about not blacklisting but penalizing companies that breach procurement violations? Do you think those are the right approaches given the procurement problems we face? But a quick answer, because we're very out of time.
As far as the agents are concerned, this whole business of banning agents, Karan, it stems from that era where you could blame a foreign hand for everything that was going wrong. There seemed to have been no recognition that for bribes to be exchanged, you need a giver and you need a taker. So you have, at that stage, they banned foreign agents, as if to say that by removing temptation from the way of the Ministry of Defense, all bribes would be sort of eliminated in some way. Agents serve a useful purpose. They can be approached for technical information. They can be approached for questions and so on to be asked about this weapon system in question. They must be there. What needs to be cracked down on is the employees within the Ministry of Defense. If there's an adequate system of surveillance within the Ministry of Defense, if there are internal checks and balances, then this whole question of bribes will be eliminated from the picture. You can't eliminate bribes by eliminating one part of the transaction.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Colonel Shukla, but you're making a good point.